We live in a very mobile society, and sometimes changing time zones many thousands of miles leaves us in very much less than optimum health. If you've had this problem, you might like to hear some of the tips that we're going to give on how to deal with traveling from place to place.
The following program presents principles designed to promote good health and is not intended to take the place of personalized professional care. The opinions and ideas expressed are those of the speaker. Viewers are encouraged to draw their own conclusions about the information presented. Welcome to Help Yourself to Health with Dr. Agatha Thrash of Uchee Pines Institute. And now, here's your host, Dr. Thrash.
Now, of course, everybody knows that well in advance of the travel, one should be well packed and everything to be relaxed. But as it happens a lot of the time, we don't have really a lot of time before the traveling is to be done to do the packing. And so packing sometimes results in just things thrown together. But if there is any possible way, you should spend some time and use some care in your packing. Pack the kind of clothing that will be specific for the area where you're going, not necessarily where you're leaving from. You leave in that kind of clothing, but let's say you leave in hot weather, but where you're going, it's immediately cold weather. When you get off the plane, you're going to be in icy cold weather. So you must take something in your carry-on to use at the time you're in an airport in a foreign country or in a distant place, if it's cold there. Always expect that where you're going, the weather is going to be more severe than where you just left. So if it's hot, you plan things that are more lightweight, much more lightweight. And if it's cold, things that are much more heavyweight so that you won't be cold or you won't be hot. It's just as important to stay cool as it is to stay warm. When we go to another place and we are very upset because of extreme heat, this can be just as upsetting to the way you feel as being shivering and trembling because it's very cold where you are. When you're on the plane, you need to be careful not to have tight clothing. Tight clothing can become very uncomfortable, particularly if you have some distension of the abdomen during the flight. So first thing is to make certain that your clothes are loose when you're traveling. Be sure that they cover the legs well. Women should have wide skirts so that they cover the legs well and give plenty of freedom in the travel without being in other people's way or getting or hanging up on something. So that can be very helpful for you with your clothing. Now, in planning the kind of clothing that you take, always take something light and helpful to wear on the plane without overburdening yourself or freezing your arms. So take a little sweater or take some slippers so that as soon as you get on the plane, you can remove your shoes and relax and be comfortable in shoes and slippers that that you can slip into. Some airlines actually furnish these things for people so that they don't have to bring those things with them. Now, for warmth, not only something that you can put on your arms, but also something that you can wrap around if necessary. And that may be a jacket or that may be a blanket. Now, blankets are usually furnished by airlines, and you can get them quite easily. Now, we have, sometimes you may want to pack actually a travel bag. A travel bag can furnish those things for you on the trip, while you're on the trip, as well as things that you get when you're immediately after you get there. Dr. Don Miller has done quite a lot of world traveling, and he can tell you something about the way he packs a travel bag. Dr. Miller?
Well, it sounds like you're familiar with traveling too.
A little bit.
You know, sometimes when you leave Alabama, where it's almost always hot, without thinking about where you're going is not going to be that way. And I, some reason, do this all the time. I pack for Alabama and I end up in Siberia and I think, why did I do this? No sweaters, no sweatshirts, no warm clothes, no long johns. It gets to be pretty uncomfortable. So one of the first things you need to do is you should need to make yourself a packing list that you have all the time. I've got one on my computer. It tells me, don't forget. Matter of fact, when I get ready to go on a trip, after I've packed, even if I've gone over the list, I sit there and say, okay, my head, do I have any hats, ties, shirts, jackets, belts, trousers, socks, shoes. Those are important things. So have a list to pack by. But this travel kit is very, very important. Things that you have with you when you are in the middle of the travel experience. Now, it depends on what you're traveling on. When I go to Eastern Europe, I do a lot of traveling on a train, and there are certain things you really want to have when you're on that train. I like to carry with me some of these little clean wipes that you can wipe your hands with, you can wipe the toilets with, you can wipe doorknobs with. I use these a lot. And I buy them in these little individual dispensers. I used to carry the big tube of them, but I find that the tube, when you get them in the luggage, if it gets pushed, it pops open and dries out, and also leaks out when it's still wet on your clothes. And so I buy a lot of these. I also carry with me in my luggage, this is going back to the luggage, not so much my travel bag, I will get a whole box of Ziploc bags, and I'll stuff some of my clothes in there, and then the rest I'll just strew around in my luggage, because it's amazing how handy they come in when you're traveling somewhere, and they make great gifts. A really good Ziploc bag, when you're in a country that does not have them, is a treasure for the people. When I'm traveling, I make sure I have some really good earplugs. As a matter of fact, I don't just take a pair, I take a box of earplugs. Because one of our missions when we're traveling is to be a blessing to other people who are traveling. And what a blessing to be able to take out of your little box some 2 clean earplugs and offer them to your seatmate or offer them to somebody else in the airplane. It can be a blessing for them, but why? I roll them up, poke them into my ears, they swell up, and the sound gets very muffled. People around doing all their stuff, and I can go right through it. I also carry with me an eye mask. Basically just a mask without the holes like the Lone Ranger, but just put them over your head, and therefore you've now got a dark field. You've got your earplugs in, everything is dark and quiet. Very nice to sleep. I also carry in my carry-on baggage a pair of slippers of some sort. And as soon as I get on the airplane, I take off my shoes, I put on the slippers. Now, Dr. Thrash has mentioned sometimes they supply, but what they always supply is little socks. And I do not want to walk into that bathroom wearing a pair of socks. And so I put on my slippers, usually a pair of thongs, something I can wear in other places, like if I'm going to be showering, it's like shower shoes, rubberized shoes. Very nice to travel with. So you want to have those with you. I carry some business cards. Matter of fact, I carry them in a little folder where I've got my cards, and then on the other side of the business cards, I have some encouraging scripture type cards. So I can share these with people. And I've got a place to put their cards. If we start up a conversation and a relationship, they know who I am, I know who they are, and we can continue what we started right there. But to give somebody a promise, I like to get these really nice. You can get them in Bible stores, religious bookstores. Little cards with a very nice picture on. One that I like very much is a picture of Jesus holding a man, and the man is sort of slumped, and in one hand he has a mallet, and the other hand he has a spike, and Jesus is holding him, and the man is weeping. And to give that to somebody, even if they can't read it, it's in English, and they're in Russia, it can be a blessing to them, and so I recommend you carry some of those with you too. I also carry with me some these are shout wipes. There's other types of wipes that if you get a stain on your clothing, right away you can treat that stain rather than go through the entire trip, because when we travel, we've got a limited amount of clothing. This way you can treat it right away and keep from ruining your trip because you've got not enough clothes. I also carry with me water, bottled water. Make sure that when you carry the bottled water, you buy it at the store and the seal has not been broken. If you've taken your bottle like I like to do and just, Uchi Pines, we've got fantastic water, fill it up, put the lid on, you get to the airport, they don't know what's in that bottle. They'll have you drink half of it or just discard the whole thing. And so make sure that you've got the completely sealed bottles, so they'll look at that, see the seal has not been broken, and I will take 3 or 4. It's not just for the trip. Now, you want to stay well hydrated on your trip, and you can get water from the airplane, but if you want some extra, I take mine. But you also want water for when you arrive to where you're going. Let's say I once ended up in Zahirabad, India, and there's no place around there to buy water where I was, but I had a couple of bottles on my own. Now, when we're talking about water, be careful of what water you buy. I was leaving Austria one time, drove up to Germany, and was flying back from Germany, and I had a very large, I think it was a 2-liter bottle of this very nice mineral water, which was they call it gassed water or fizzy water or carbonated water. And so I have this in the airplane, it's rolling around at my feet for a while. We landed in Amsterdam, take off from Amsterdam. About 20,000 feet, I start to feel a little bit thirsty, so I bring up this great big bottle of fizzy water, sit it between my legs, and I break the seal. Now, you might know what happened at that point. I got a complete shower all in my lap. So make sure you don't carry fizzy water on the planes. If you just want straight water, it'll be a whole lot more convenient for you when you're up about 20,000 feet, all the pressures and all the shaking of the thing. I also carry with me in my carry-on baggage a change of clothing. It's not just for my computer and my camera and things like this, because if my luggage ends up missing somewhere, I want enough clothing with me to get me through the night. So I got my pajamas in there. I've got a full change of clothing. I've got my most important things in my carry-on bags so that I get in my mind, okay, my goal is that everything's going to arrive. My expectation is all that's going to arrive is me and my carry-on. That way I've got what I need when I get there. I also carry some literature for people, literature about any spiritual subject that you can share with them as you're going through your experience. I also carry some type of snacking food. Sometimes in the airlines, either you're not fed or you're fed. You know, you put in for your vegan meal, and they come by and they say, do you want a pork or fish? And I said, well, I asked for a vegan meal. You're not down for a vegan meal. And so it's nice to be able to open up your carry-on, your little travel kit, and pull out some granola or some travel mix or some nice things. You don't want to eat heavy in an airplane. You want to eat very light, but you might want to eat something. I also carry some melatonin with me, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, but it's nice to have melatonin. If you're flying east especially, when I'm flying east, which means you're going into the sun, which is usually you're flying at nighttime across the Atlantic Ocean, I get on the airplane, I get settled in. About 2 hours later, I take a melatonin, trying to sleep for that extremely short night because you got a long day ahead of you once you get there. I also carry with me, and this is a sort of a strange thing to carry, I carry a harmonica. It's amazing sometimes when you get into a flight and you got some fussy child sitting right next to you, and they just can't be still. You start playing a harmonica, they get completely quiet and watch what you're doing. And I think people like to hear some sounds. Now, you may not be able to play the harmonica, but if I can play a harmonica, you can play the harmonica. Just get one and start blowing and drawing, and pretty soon you're going to find that you can play that thing quite well. So there's some of the simple things. Oh, one other thing I want to mention. If you travel a lot to the same country, I travel a lot to the country of Ukraine. What I've done this last time I went there, when I was going through customs, I got a few sheets of their custom declaration forms. So now I have them at my home. I'm leaving for Ukraine again soon. I can take out that form, have it completely itemized before I even leave my house. When I get to Kiev, instead of waiting in these long lines while everyone's filling their things out, I go straight up to the counter, give them my customs declaration, show them my passport with my visas, and breeze on through. One other thing, when you're packing your suitcase, keep an itemized list of everything you're packing, especially things that you might want to declare, or someone might wonder, where did you get this? You don't have to list all your pairs of socks and how many shirts, but anything that's electronic, anything that's hardware, you want to list this on a sheet of paper, because the next time you go across another border, you want an itemized list of what you have with you, because it'll make things a whole lot more pleasant. Traveling is a great experience. When you're out there traveling, remember that you are representing not America, you're representing Jesus Christ. And Dr. Thrash, I think that's exactly what God wants us to do, to be good representatives of Him.
Yes, travel is for some people a great blessing. a great joy and a nice time, but for others of us like myself, it's not the very nicest. I always travel with a good bit of discomfort and wish I could do what I need to do over there at my home. One of the things that can make travel a lot easier for you is that of the food that you eat. For about a week before you go into a trip, especially if you're the kind of person who gets motion sick, make your food very light. Especially don't eat very heavy fats. A lot of nuts, you may eat a few nuts, but don't eat a lot of nuts because they can be pretty heavy foods. All kinds of free fats, margarine, mayonnaise, fried foods, cooking fats, salad oils, all of these are very heavy foods. They tend to make it so that you're more likely to get sick at the stomach if you have the tendency to be motion sick. Now, in addition to that, on the day of the flight, try to figure out when the next meal will be for you. So you simply figure how many hours it's going to take you to go to the next place, and then you decide they will be eating at X hour, which for me is Y hour. So it's wise if you take that meal at Y hour instead of at your regular meal time. Then your next meal, unless it's in the night on the plane, then you eat that also at the next scheduled time for them where you're going. Now, if night catches you and you're on the plane during the night, they're going to offer you some food sometime during the night. Refuse that food. You will do far better if you do. Your jet lag will be a lot less severe. You will have a lot less gastrointestinal distress if you simply say no to that food. Then with the meals that you eat on the plane or before and after, if you'll very carefully regulate this, you will suffer much less from jet lag. And now Dr. Miller will tell you another aspect that's very important about traveling. Dr. Miller?
You know, another thing she reminded me of while she was talking is when I travel at night, she says when they offer you the meal, refuse it. Often they're going to wake you up to offer you the meal. I like to carry with me a do not disturb sign, and I hang it right around my neck. It's right on my chest, so I'm sitting there asleep. It's on top of the blanket, do not disturb, and they will not disturb you. And so I think that's a really good suggestion. Now, Dr. Thrash has mentioned a term called jet lag. It's a problem that we go through. It doesn't have to be jet lag. It could be changing to daylight savings time lag. Just changing 1 hour has a profound effect upon our circadian rhythms, upon our whole body. And basically, jet lag is a violation of our circadian rhythm. It's an assault against our system, and we've got to learn how to recover from it. Now, the first thing I would recommend, if you're going to do international travel, especially flying east, which I've already mentioned is the hardest way, try to arrive early. And I don't mean 2 hours early, I mean a few days early, because it will take you a few days. Matter of fact, it takes me at least a week to get over the critical effects of jet lag and a month to get over the entire residuals of the jet lag. And so you want to arrive a few days early that you can sit there and relax and not have to have your mind very sharp. Not long ago, I flew to Japan, from Cincinnati to Atlanta to Tokyo. And that was a long trip. I got picked up in Tokyo and was taken, and within 2 hours of arriving at my hotel, I was standing in front of a group of people speaking, and I was really in bad shape. Now, the Lord gives grace in these times, and I was able to think clearly and speak clearly, but after the meeting was over, I was totally exhausted. And I don't really want to do that type of a program again, although I will if God calls upon me to do it exactly that way. But what can you do about jet lag? When you arrive at your destination, you want to get outside in the sunshine and get some exercise. Now, I will say if you're flying west, if you're coming back from Europe to America, you usually arrive in the mid-afternoon. It'll take you a while to get to your home. What I usually try to do is do a few things and go to bed at a normal time, like 8, 8:30, or 9 o'clock, and get myself back onto my schedule. It's very much easier to get on your schedule going west than it is east. Going east, you have a very short night and an extremely long day because you're always flying at nighttime going over west. So get some sunshine, get some exercise, resist the temptation to take a sleeping aid anywhere along here. Now the melatonin is just fine. It will naturally help you get some rest. I like to take that myself, but no sleeping aids if you can't sleep at that night of the flight or the next night. Let your body naturally take over. Stay away from alcohol, stay away from caffeine, stay away from nicotine. All these things are extremely bad for a jet lag situation, so you don't want those things. You want to, as we've already mentioned twice, keep yourself well hydrated, especially a few days before going on your trip. Before you go on the trip, you want to be well hydrated, you want to be well rested. Now, if you're like me, you're packing the night before you leave, and the morning you're leaving, you're throwing the stuff in the suitcase and you're getting all stressed out. If you could pack a week ahead of time, or at least 3 or 4 days ahead of time, and those last few days are restful, getting ready to go days, that's the best way to do it. That way you don't have all the stress along with your travel. Eat light, don't take the late meal, arrive early, exercise, simple things. And I find that when I follow these myself, I don't have the major problems with jet lag, although I'm still going to meet it because I've violated my own body's constitution. But it can be very kind to us if we do it with some moderation and do it with these simple things in mind. So, Dr. Thrash, does it work for you?
Oh yes, those things work for me, but I still don't enjoy the traveling over many miles and a lot of time zones. One of the things that you can always benefit from is an understanding of light. Light that comes into your eyes sets your circadian rhythm. Now the circadian rhythm is that biologic time clock that's built around a day. It takes 24 hours for us to complete one cycle. The circadian rhythm can be set by somewhat by what you do. So if you have figured out what time it's going to be in the place of your destination, then figure back to what time that would be where you are now. And so you simply advance or retreat in the time to agree with where you're going. And then when it gets dark in the place where you're going, especially when it gets to be bedtime, put on some kind of blinder or eye mask, as Dr. Miller mentioned, that can make it so that your eyes are dark. Even if you can't sleep, you still need to have the darkness. Then when you wake up, if it's or when you take the mask off, if you can leave it on until it's time for it to be daylight on the other side where you're going, then take the mask off at the time of daylight in that country. When you get there, you may need a flashlight because it's true, even though you've taken these precautions, you've eaten on their schedule, you've darkened your eyes on their schedule, even so you may still wake up in the night when you should be sleeping and you are wide awake. There's no way you can sleep. And you don't want to turn the lights on, so you just lie there miserable in bed. So if you have a flashlight, that can be very helpful to you. It makes it so that you don't have to turn all the lights on in order to at least just look at your watch or look over some notes or read a passage in the Bible or whatever may be your desire at the moment. With the water is of course for you to stay well hydrated. One of the reasons for you to stay well hydrated is to avoid travel strokes. These are getting to be quite an important cause of disability today. So travel strokes can be avoided to a large degree if a person will do two things. Number one, they drink plenty of water. How much is that? Well, it's enough to produce around 2 quarts of urine a day. Well, you have no way to measure. So is there another way that you can tell? Yes, about the color of the urine, that's a good way. So if you know that the urine should be pale in color, should not be entirely watercolored, but it should certainly not be dark, then that's about the color that the urine should be, and you're well hydrated if you can achieve that. Then the second thing is you must move. Now, move in an airline seat, there you are just crowded into it, and a person is here and a person is there. How can you move? Well, there are certain ways. One is you can yawn. Just take a big breath and try your best to yawn. And then another thing is you can just raise your hands right up over your head. That's your space up there. So you raise your hands and you stretch upward as much as you can. And then if you can't go any farther, you just squeeze your shoulder muscles, squeeze your arms, your hands, then your abdominal muscles, your back muscles, and then the legs and the thighs. It's especially important to keep the blood circulating in the legs and in the thighs to prevent a stroke. Clothing, of course, should not be tight around the waist nor tight around any extremity. If you eat heavy foods like beans or nuts or a lot of high fiber foods just before you leave for a trip, when you're in the air, that gas that's in the intestinal tract will swell, and that will make you all the more uncomfortable. If you're traveling with an infant, several things to remember about traveling with an infant. One is when you go up and when you come down, but especially when you come down. If you'll provide something for the infant to suck during that time, then that can help the infant to be much more comfortable, because the sucking action will open up the eustachian tube and keep the air equalized between the internal ear, the middle ear, and the external air outside. So that can be helpful to the baby. Then another thing, remember about the baby, that you should not diaper the baby too tightly, because a tightly bound baby, when the intestinal tract swells a little bit with the increase in the altitude, then the baby doesn't have a lot of room to expand. And so if they expand just a couple of tablespoonsful worth, it's going to be very uncomfortable for the baby. So they may be most uncomfortable during the flight. So those are some very important things to remember for a small baby. You can dilute the baby's food on the way up so that the production of gas is minimized, and that can help the baby with that. There are certain threats to health, and if you remember these when you're traveling and adjust to them, plan for them, make the provisions whenever they are supposed to come up, you will travel much more successfully. You will avoid many of the things that injure people or even threaten their lives, even such things as allergies, which have been in the news a good bit recently about airline foods. So with these tips, we hope the next time you're traveling, it will be not only pleasant but also very safe and very comfortable.